Hey, it's Spellweaver, and now I want to show you how I create the sprites, since I've made dozens already and only mentioned the process in passing in my devlogs. As a disclaimer, it's by no means the best way to make your sprites, and it's always better to hire a real artist. But with indie development it's never that easy, and if you want reasonably detailed sprites but you can't draw, this method might just suffice. So let's get to it. Say I'm making a mausoleum and want some burial urns to place there. I'll show you the end result right now. Here is a room with several urns that differ slightly. The process always starts with me checking if maybe there are some dedicated sprites in public access that would fit me. So first I'll look in places like OpenGameArt. That rarely yields anything though, nor does it this time. Nothing that I see right now appeals to me. I take a short look at OpenClipArt then, get predictably disappointed there too, and move on to Google. The great thing about Google Images is its ability to separate Creative Commons license from the rest, and that it obviously has access to the largest number of images at once. The amount of various photos in public access outweighs dedicated game assets by orders of magnitude. The bad part is that most of those images weren't originally intended to be used as sprites in games, so we'll have to get creative. When going into search, I already have a kind of mental image of what my sprite would look like. A clay vase of sorts, greyish-brown, with some engravings. I scrolled through the Google output several times, stopped for a moment at this glass urn. Its shape looks fitting. It's glass of course, but I could probably edit the colors so that it looks like something else. If I find nothing better, I'll keep this one. Then I stumble upon this clay urn that looks a lot like what I envision. I also like the lighting and the angle of the photo. The shape seems pretty distinct, the details aren't too small. Of course it's Roman, not medieval, but who would know the difference? The color of the clay is also more saturated than I need, but that's easy to change. It's Wikimedia Commons with Creative Commons license, so I can use this without being afraid of lawyers coming after me. So, content with my find, I save this picture and go to remove.bg. This site occasionally stumbles, but most of the time it makes a good job of separating objects from their background. And in this case it works perfectly. So now I have a burial urn photo with a transparent background. The only thing left is to make it into a sprite. If it stumbled, I'd have a decision to either clean up the background manually or look for another picture. It's also possible that I'd only have to correct some mistakes the AI made, rather than do it all myself. My sprites are 64 by 64 pixels, but the method should probably work for any size, as long as the initial photo is larger. Of course, having only 64 pixels in my sprite makes the final editing step far easier. I open my graphic editor of choice, it's paint.net, and start preparing the picture. First, I advise applying the sharpen tool, as it adds depth to the final sprite by accentuating the shadows, and lets you keep small details better when resizing. Of course, as with all tools, you should know when it's fitting to use it and when it's not. Here I even applied it twice, which I don't normally do. Then I play with hue and saturation a little and decide to desaturate and darken the image somewhat without changing the hue. Then at last I resize the image to 64 by 64 to see how well it goes, and it looks pretty decent. Pretty sharp, not blurry, all the details are clearly visible. Though this way it would be the size of the human, so I should actually reduce it further. Now it's time to see how it looks in the game. Add a new object to the code, add it to the level generation, and find it in the game. And here they are, the urns. Now that I can see them in the game, I can confirm that the sprites are decently sharp, and their color fits. But they are still too large, so I'll reduce their size further. Note that when doing that, I'm reverting to the full resolution image, and then shrinking this one to the smaller size, instead of shrinking the already shrunken sprite further. This is because resizing with minor adjustment always causes some blurring, and when the image is only 64 pixels, it can be very noticeable. So let's see this one. No, that's clearly too small. One more adjustment, and now the size seems about right. Though the urn could stand to be thinner. It would of course not reflect the original proportions, but it's not about being faithful to the original, it's about the sprite looking good. And now I'm going into the most laborious part of the sprite creation, manual editing. The top of the original urn is uneven, which translated badly into the shrunken image. So I'll fix it manually using the recolor tool. Then I also add a line of semi-transparent pixels to imitate the edge of the circle at the top, using the pencil. Let's see how it looks. Good enough, but I've been noticing those strange bright pixels in the top right of the urn for a while. I check out the original picture to see what it is, and turns out that it's a brightly lit piece of ornament that became even brighter thanks to the sharpen tool. In the final picture it looks out of place, so I'm placing the sprite over the black background to see the bright parts better, and erase the edge carefully. Then darken the sprite around the place with the recolor tool. Loading the game again, and I'm satisfied with the result. The only thing this urn is missing is a shadow. I don't draw a detailed shadow here, just a blob of semi-transparent black at the bottom layer. A couple of tries to get it right, and the urn is done. Normally I would also add some shadows to the sprite itself, but here they are already thick enough. Now the only thing that bothers me is that the ornament makes the urn look very distinct, and so when the sprite is repeated it's immediately noticeable, so I'll add some variation. In other situation I might just look for a different image, but here it would be better to make small edits. So first I create a copy of the file, and once again use the recolor tool to erase the engravings. Adding this variant to the game and checking it out, this looks pretty good. Now let's add one more. Here I am using the recolor tool again, to add a pattern of pixels that's similar to the original ornament but different, and try not to make it too sharp. Those are basically just random lines. And here's the result that I showed you at the very start. There are 3 sprites of urns with some slight differences. All the work took me a little over an hour. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes much longer, and the longest part is either looking for a fitting photo or editing small details. And of course, the quality of the sprite in the end will still depend on your skills, but I think the fact that everyone can do the basic process makes it worth it for other solo devs. The only thing remaining is attribution. Here's the license, and I need to add the link to this image to my credits. In fact, that's what I'm going to do right now. And done. I hope it was useful for you. I guess you could subscribe or something if you're interested in my work. See you!